Waste Management Association. Yeah, I'm like, what is it? Anyway, we're doing our Lunch and Learn webinar series. And so today we're going to be hearing about odor in Denver from staff from the Denver Department of Public Health and Environment. And if you have any questions, feel free to type them in the chat, but we'll have time at the end to do a Q&A. And if you're not presenting, then please have your microphone muted. All right, take it away.
Great, thanks, Annarelli, and hello, everyone. My name is Bill Obermann. I'm here with the Denver Department of Public Health and Environment, and I work in environmental quality. It's a division of our public health department here, and I exclusively work in air quality. I work for the air and water section here, so privileged to be a part of that team, and I do air quality on all kinds of things. One is odor, and particularly looking at our policies that are local here surrounding odor and how it's regulated at the city level. So I'm going to speak a lot about that. I'm joined here today by Mark Petersen. He'll introduce himself when his part of the slide deck comes up. But he is one of our inspectors here in the air and water section. And he has a lot of great information and real on the ground experience to relay about what he finds out in our communities of Denver in terms of odor and how we measure odor and how we enforce our regulations with odor in the city here. So it's a two-part presentation. I'm kind of opening it. Mark's going to give a bit of his experience out in the field, and then I'm going to close it off with some of our policies and also examples of where we're looking to improve and what other states and even countries are doing with odor control. So we'll leave plenty of room at the end also for questions, and super excited all of you are here to hear more about kind of what we do at the local level with odor control. So let me go to the next slide here. Oops. There's always the person running the slideshow problem, which is me. Annarelli.
I don't see.
There we go. There we go.
Okay,
That's
there we
the
go.
next slide. Okay, got it on the right screen now. So our odor ordinance history. So actually, we've been regulating odors in the city for a long time. It was back in 1990 that we even created the odor rules that are within our air pollution control chapter. And so it has quite a long history. In 2008, we really took a more serious look at the odor rules in that air pollution chapter. It's chapter 4 of our municipal ordinance. And we revised them to trigger action by us to inspect a property when it had 5 odor complaints in only 12 hours. These would be odor complaints from individual residents in the city, so it couldn't all be the same resident. And it was in a very compressed time frame, only 12 hours. So that would have to be quite an odor issue to get 5 individual complaints in only 12 hours. But that was what we had in the regs at the time. That is absolutely modeled after a lot of other local governments in the country. If they even have any sort of standard on when to trigger some kind of action due to odor complaints, it's not atypical to find something like 5 odor complaints in only 12 hours. Des Moines, Iowa has a similar rule, for example. But then in 2012, Colorado legalized recreational marijuana, and it took a while to figure out how to sell it properly. And that took place in 2014. That's when recreational marijuana sales began. Gave us about 2 years, and that cultivation industry for recreational marijuana just ballooned in Denver, because Denver was one of the first cities to really legalize it, not only to be sold here, but also to be grown here. So we had over 300 marijuana cultivation facilities in place by 2016. And that caused us to respond to city council concerns on odor complaints from marijuana specifically. And we went into our regulations, and number one, and what we're going to really focus on a lot today, is in 2016, we added a thing called odor control plans. And those are unique, of course, to Denver. In our city, if you cultivate marijuana, you are required to have an odor control plan. There are several other types of facilities that are required to have an odor control plan just by what they do as well. And Mark will get into that in a moment. But it came in 2016. We had our first odor control plans due in 2017. Keep in mind, this is hundreds of facilities. And then COVID hit, kind of in this next part of the timeline. It didn't hit in 2017, as we know, but it hit in 2019, and the program was continuing. We still had odor control plans to regulate. By the time 2021 came, we still had 320 facilities with plans. From what I understand from some staff who are no longer here, but just anecdotally, at the outset of this in like 2017, we had more dispensaries and cultivation facilities combined than Starbucks and McDonald's in the city of Denver. So, it was a big footprint in the city. Today, there's been a lot of consolidation of the marijuana cultivation industry in Denver. We're down to 187 facilities with plans, whether those facilities either went out of business or maybe they consolidated or they were merged with others. Today we're looking at 187. Still quite a few cultivation facilities in the city. Again, these are just the places that grow marijuana. They're not all the places that sell recreational or medical marijuana. And with that, let me take it to the next slide here. And Petey, go for it.
Great, thank you, Bill. Thanks for having me. So there are different types of businesses that we've identified and put in the regulation as requiring a odor control plan, and these would be pet food manufacturing, marijuana cultivation, animal rendering, petroleum refining, sewage treatment, wood preservation, and then there is a provision in there where the Board of Health may determine they can add as needed. We also require a odor control plan if the facility, by measurement, we get an odor violation, and I'll be talking about that a little bit later. But basically, with a nasal ranger, if we have a odor reading above a 7 to 1, we would require a odor control plan. And then if we receive 5 or more complaints within a 30-day period, they have to be separate. And then we would have to verify that those are valid concerns that were called in. And then there are some exemptions, usually with temporary facilities like the stock show when it comes into town, and transient work like, say, road work, maybe repaving activities, stuff like that. So, Bill, we can go to the next slide. All right, so the anatomy of an odor control plan. So this is the document that we would require a facility to generate, that we would review and approve to help control odors, and kind of go over the parts of it here. So the first part is going to be facility information, what you'd kind of expect. So address or addresses, if the facility has multiple, if the mailing address is different than, say, their active address. Points of contact, we need to know who to call or have conversations with should there be any issues. And then, the phone numbers, emails, stuff like that. Hours of operation, so we know when the facility is going to be operating, what time to expect operation. Facility description, processes, and applicable licenses or permits they may have. And then once we get that basic information, we get more into the meat of things. So odor emitting information, what their processes are, where are the odors coming from. We want that to be described. And then a floor plan, we do require one. It helps us orient ourselves if an inspector has to go in to conduct an inspection. It gives them the ability to kind of plan and kind of orient themselves in the building. And then what the whole point of the odor control plan is the odor mitigation practices. So this is broken down into two sections: the administrative controls and the engineering controls. Admin controls are things like record keeping, training, operation and maintenance plans, and other procedural type activities, where the engineering controls are going to look at what kind of equipment or design processes are put in place to actually control or capture odor. Next slide, please. So as part of that engineered section, we're going to look for things like system design, system processes, and then operation and maintenance. You know, we're not necessarily the experts in, say, that particular facility. So we do look for things like an engineer sign off and design. So we want to see that it's been reviewed by a professional and that it's going to stand up. And then we'd like to know, especially if it's a new facility, we want to know what the kind of design and timeline for installation and implementation would be. Another big part of the odor control plan is going to be the complaint tracking. We want to make sure that the facility has the ability to receive citizen concerns or complaints, how they're going to then log those complaints and then respond to those citizens should they receive any of those concerns. And then finally, the biggest, another big part is the record keeping, keeping track of these concerns that come in, keeping track of operations and maintenance, keeping track of any planned maintenance. Those are stuff that as an inspector, we would go in and review as part of the inspection to ensure compliance with the odor control plan. Next slide, please. Okay, so what makes an odor control plan successful? And this is kind of going back. We have a facility that I'm going to kind of talk about because these plans do take a lot of work. It's a living document, and we really do need sort of buy-in from the facility. This needs to be kind of a cooperative, endeavor. And so we have a facility, I'll call them MFI. And MFI, based on, they were one of those categorical facilities that were required to have an odor control plan. And so they had one, and for the most part, we hadn't received really a whole lot of concerns about them. They were kind of in an industrial part of town, and no one really thought thought anything of them. Until then, as you guys, everyone knows, Denver is a developing city, and they had a lot more activity and other industries moving in close proximity to them. And based on their industry type, it's a wastewater treatment, by the way, and as you can imagine, it gave off a lot of odors. And all of a sudden, now that they had neighbors, we had started receiving numerous calls, probably to the tune of 5 to, I'd say 5 or 7 calls a week. And these calls came in describing the horrendous wastewater treatment odors. And so we responded. We went out, we verified, yes, they were producing, the odors that you would expect from a wastewater treatment plant, but they were present and quite strong at times. Because they had the odor control plan, we worked with the facility to update their odor control plan to kind of reinforce it, and they really bought into the process. The company helped commit to being a good community member. They invested hundreds of thousands of dollars into a new odor mitigation system. They hired engineers to conduct odor studies. They've trained their staff to conduct odor readings, and it's part of their daily routine where they go out, they patrol their property line, they conduct odor readings with a nasal ranger, and they document all of that. And they even worked with some of their neighbors and got buy-in from their neighbors when designing their odor mitigation system. And since the implementation of their new system, the number of concerns has dropped dramatically. Now, we don't expect it to be zero. We know that as a wastewater treatment plant, they're going to produce odor. It's inevitable, but since the time they've implemented their new system, where we now receive about, I'd say maybe one complaint every few months, versus the, say half dozen a week we used to get. So this is kind of one of our success stories. We continue to work with them to make sure that they're staying on top of things, which they are, and we are very grateful for their help. But this is what it takes to make these successful. Is we do need cooperation, and it does need to be a collaborative effort. It just makes the process so much easier, so much smoother, and it's better for everybody, and the neighbors have a much more enjoyable experience where they're at. So yeah, we can go on the next slide. So another industry type that wasn't specifically called out are coffee roasters. Now, this is kind of interesting because like I love the smell of coffee in the morning, right? Like I think a lot of us do. We enjoy our coffee. However, what we found in Denver is these sort of artisan coffee roasters popped up around Denver. The roasting process it produces a very acrid smell. I don't know if any of you go and visit or have a favorite coffee roaster in your neighborhood, but they can get pretty odorous, and the odors can be intense. And what we were finding is, and this was actually before I started as an investigator with the city, but what was found was that neighbors were calling in their local coffee roasters saying, man, I love coffee, but living next to this place is kind of intense. They're roasting from early hours in the morning till sometimes late at night, and it's tough to live with. So based on the number of concerns, we went to these industries and started having conversations with them about business standards and practices. And what we found was that there are some BMPs, best management practices, for mitigating coffee odors. And so now we work with the coffee roasters when we do come across a coffee roaster, a new one that's being established. We work with them to ensure that their equipment, when they purchase these roasters, they come with afterburners that obliterate the odor. And so we work with them to make sure that equipment is installed on their roasters, either as an aftermarket product, or they're buying roasters that already come with that product or with that feature installed. And apparently it's a pretty standard feature nowadays with new industrial coffee roasters. So that's another one of those industries that, even though it wasn't recognized at first as being a source of odors, it's an example of ones that we've come across where we've had to expand our view, and now it's been very successful, as a lot of the coffee roasters, it's just an industry standard now that a lot of them already have these afterburners installed, and the number of concerns with odors for coffee roasters have gone way down. Matter of fact, I can't remember in the last year when we've gotten an odor concern about a coffee roaster. So on to the next slide. All right, so let's talk about Colorado regulation number 2, and the nasal ranger. So Reg 2, which was adopted in 2013, says that there's a odor violation when you detect 1 volume of odorous air diluted with 7 or more volumes of odor-free air. And this is measured by any instrument or device chosen by the Colorado Air Pollution Control Division. And specifically, the nasal ranger is that device. It blends ambient air with filtered air. And so if we go on to the next slide, you can see the parts of the nasal ranger here. So you have the nose piece that the operator uses. That's where you're breathing through your nose. You're bringing in the the mixed air, you have two filters on either side, and then you have a dial that has different apertures. And as you spin the dial, that's what's going to determine how much dilution you're getting. So the dial has a 0, 2, 4, 8, 16, 32, 64, and some of these nasal ranges go all the way up to 128 dilution, which I don't know. That's a lot. So that would have to be some pretty gnarly odors to be getting any readings there. But at anything 8 and above, it would be considered a violation. And then there's some rules around what is a violation. Now, with the nasal ranger, we do have to certified on it once a year. So you go and take a practical exam. There's also a written portion, and the state certifies you on it. And then these devices do have to be maintained, so you do have to send them back into the company to be calibrated once a year. And so the city, we have 2 of them, and around that time of year, we're sending them in, getting them calibrated, sending back. And so this is the device that we use. It's not a perfect system. Odors are very, as you know, it's all objective. But the device helps us or gives us a standard in which we can standardize the intensity of the odor. Again, it's still objective, but this is sort of the best we got. And so, yeah, we'll go on to the next slide, please. So when we do go out for an odor reading, let's say we get a concern that comes in and we go out and we are looking for try to determine the intensity or if there's an odor violation. We need to take at least 2 readings, a minimum of 15 minutes apart, but within the same 60 minutes. This is described in the method in Reg 2. And we also take 1 reading upwind of the source, and that allows us to determine, yes, it is in fact, to identify where that source is or the source of the odor. And if we do get 2 readings of 8 to 1 or higher within that 60 minutes, separated by 15 minutes, then that is a violation. We would document that. And depending on either the city, we could issue an administrative citation, or we could, because it is a state Reg 2, we can also refer it to the Air Pollution Control Division for enforcement as well. Next slide, please. All right, so got to talk about the elephant in the room, because whenever we talk about odor, no matter we give a presentation or we're talking about odor with the public, questions about Purina, the pet food manufacturer in Denver, always come up no matter what. It's a highly visible facility and we do receive a lot of concerns. It generates the most concerns of any facility in Denver. Some things to know is that the odor emissions are not toxic. It's reduced nitrogen and sulfur compounds. But we would be remiss if we didn't recognize the impact to the quality of life it has on the Denver citizens and residents. A lot of people describe not being able to go outside because the odor is too intense. However, just to kind of put things in perspective, it is incredibly difficult or incredibly rare that we do get odor violations. An odor reading of 8 to 1 is incredible. That is a very intense odor. And typically, any source typically will see odors around 2 to 1, 4 to 1. But based on the reg, we need to have 8 to 1 or higher, and we need to have 2 of them within 60 minutes. Anyways, in the last 10 years, there's only been 2 Reg 2 violation enforcement cases that I know of. So, all right. All right. And then Bill, I think I'll hand it back to you.
Yeah, sounds good, Mark. Thanks. So yeah, as Mark was mentioning, an elephant in the room is the pet food manufacturing that we have in North Denver. Purina is now the only facility in North Denver that manufactures pet food. We used to have some others actually. But in these recent couple of years, just to underscore what those complaints are, 23, 24, 25 to date, you can see the numbers there pretty easily on that slide. We have one pet food manufacturing facility in Denver. And, in 2023, for example, there were 93 concerns and complaints on that one facility. In comparison with our marijuana cultivators that I was mentioning earlier in our opening slide, we have about 180 of those now. We probably had a little more in 2023, but we had over 180 individual marijuana cultivation facilities, and we only got 16 complaints. Partly this shows that the odor control plans we have put into place have been very effective with marijuana. As I mentioned in our historical slide at the beginning, real reason that we have odor control plans and a lot of what PD has talked about is because of concerns in city council around marijuana cultivation back in 2016. So those complaints have come down dramatically. Our complaints with pet food have not. This is also an interesting contrast that with all the other types of complaints we get, no matter what year you look at here, our other complaints are including things like auto body shops and crematories and generators and laundromats. These are hundreds of different places in Denver, are basically the same number of complaints that we're getting from one pet food manufacturer in North Denver. I should also note that that other includes resident to resident complaints, which we get, we respond to those as well. It's not always just on business that we get odor complaints. So one thing we've noted, and this is in a partnership with a researcher at UCD, University of Colorado, Denver, Dr. Priyanka D'Souza, looked at our odor complaint data and found a couple of interesting things. One was that there are more and more hotspots over time. So this graph on the right shows a span of years, just showing that those green dots on the map, there are more of them as time goes on from 2018, and that there are more hotspots identified. What that really means is there's at least 5 verified complaints in our department, and we verify them, within 1 kilometer radius over the course of 1 day. So what that really is meaning is we're getting more complaints more frequently from smaller areas of the city, and most of those areas are in North Denver. So what does that mean for our local odor control regulations? It means we have a lot of constraints right now. We've talked a lot about odor control plans, what triggers them to be created in the first place, and what our complaints look like. The problem with our ordinance today is we cannot use those complaints to require a facility to do more if it already has a plan that it's implementing. Essentially today we can go check that the original plan has been implemented at a facility, but if we're still getting a lot of complaints about that facility, we don't really have the strength to reopen that plan. It has to be a very collaborative relationship with the regulated entity when we receive those complaints, and they need to have the desire to improve their odors. That's what happened with that example private sewage treatment plant example that Mark shared earlier. In those cases, the odor control plans work. They willingly put in new technology and revise their plan on their own with us, but we cannot force that. That's a weakness of our regulations in odor. We cannot require more odor controls when the current controls are inadequate. We always have the right to inspect a facility. We always have a right to enforce the plan that exists, but we cannot by law right now require more controls when they already have a plan. Clearly for some folks as well, financial penalties alone are not enough. There have been a number of financial penalties in North Denver, but that's not enough to really move the needle in terms of reducing the odors, particularly from pet food. It has been enough in the past with marijuana cultivation. A lot of those facilities were much smaller, much more individually owned, and a $2,000 per day violation threshold was enough to move the needle in those cases. Also want to show that our odor generating facilities are very much tied to disproportionately impacted communities that are impacted by air pollution of many different types, but it includes odor. On this map, it's a busy map, and I apologize for that, but I took it out of Dr. D'Souza's research of our odor complaints and where our facilities are located that have odor control plans, and then she built this map. The darker shades in the map are census block groups with non-white populations. So you can easily see that many of the red dots kind of look like asterisks, which are odor control facilities, odor control plan facilities, are located in those or near those darker census block groups. All the other colorful dots you see on this map are where our complaints are coming from over a series of years. And one thing you can note is that complaints are distributed all throughout the city, whether it's in a non-white census block group or a predominantly white census block group, excuse me. We see these odor complaints from all over the city. So it's not just one issue. We do have a lot of complaints coming from Purina in North Denver. That is true. But we also get complaints from many other places, as I was showing in those other slides. So this just gives you an idea of it's a citywide problem. A couple of slides here. That's where we're going to stop now on what we do locally in Denver. But I wanted to bring some other thoughts on research I've done on what's going on in the rest of the US, and also one just brief slide at the very end of what's going on internationally, because there's actually a lot going on internationally with odor. But some of the other state regulations out there, you can see in this box in red here, this first box on the left, that there are 8 states that have the exact same measurement standard we do here in Colorado of that 7-to-1 that Mark was describing earlier. Most likely they measure that with a nasal ranger. So that's an actual measurement standard with an olfactometer, of which the nasal ranger is a unit that does that. The states on the right, there are 5 of them that really just reference odor as a nuisance, but there's not a specific measurement standard. So there isn't like a 7-to-1 dilution ratio or something more objective like that. They more define odor as a nuisance in somewhere in their air quality regulations at the state level. However, I want to bring an example from Massachusetts, because while they do not have that dilution standard in their rules, they actually did a lot with one particular case on odor control in Massachusetts. And I want to just highlight this example because I think it brings in a lot of the conventional things we do in air quality assessment into an odor context. So I think that'd be really interesting for a lot of people to see, because odor is very objective. It's what we smell versus measuring NO2 1 hour, for example. But this is a case in Massachusetts. I had the privilege of hearing about it at an odor conference in Toronto last year, and it was a really great example of how they're kind of trying to apply a lot of our similar air quality controls and standards to odor. So I just want to be completely transparent, and feel free to hit me up for the slide deck that is this case I'm going to present to you. But this was presented by some consultants from Massachusetts at that conference. So this is really their work, not mine. And I'm just skimming it quickly in 5 minutes here. But I think a really interesting thing in step 1, what did they do? They went and did stack testing. Well, we do stack testing for criteria pollution, for HAPs. And you can do the same thing for odor. And what they did is they went in the stack for, this is actually a spray booth facility, has multiple spray booths in a surface coating facility. They collected Tedlar bag samples, which we do in air quality all the time, but they collected these for odor evaluation. So what they measured in the actual pollutant they were looking for, they had identified what was the odorous pollutant by this point, and then they had captured these Tedlar bags, and you can see in comparison to what Mark was talking about with our dilution ratio of 7:1 at the state, that's ambient air. These are the dilution thresholds measured in stack of that odorous pollutant. So things like 8,124. So very, very, very odorous, very concentrated, but that's because it's in the stack. So that's what the Tedlar bag analysis gave them. It was like, how concentrated is this odorous pollutant in the stack? Then they did a really interesting thing, and this is unique to odor. They actually have a panel of odor, certified odor panel. They're called odor panelists. And they are actually certified by some companies. These are human beings that are smelling the odors and characterizing them. And so the reason they do this is they say, okay, now we have that odorous sample, that same Tedlar bag we took. We're going to put it into a machine that then samples it to all these different panelists sitting around a machine who are certified, and they're going to smell it. And at what concentration, what dilution threshold do they no longer smell it? And that's what you see in this below this red box here, the first red box on the left. Those dilution thresholds are much lower than what you saw in the stack, because now they're trying to figure out how much do we have to dilute this odorous pollutant before the rest of the public won't smell it after it leaves the facility, the stack. So once they get that dilution threshold, they then used AirMod, the same air quality modeling platform we use for criteria pollution and a lot of air quality assessments in Colorado and other states. They use the same platform to model odor isopleths, which is what this is here. This is just using existing conditions. They use dispersion modeling, a really high dilution threshold. I have it circled there in the right of 8,124. That's extremely odorous. That's untreated odor. And what did it give them? A 1 hour max there circled on the bottom of 48.5 odor units per meter cubed. Okay. Now, without having to break down what an odor unit means, essentially one odor unit is the measurement we all strive for in odor at your property line to not have it detected by the average person. And so here it was clearly showing that that odor unit was too high. At 48.5, you could certainly smell it at the property, and that was the reason they were getting these complaints. They do some modifications to the facility in the modeling world. They bring down that dilution threshold to 97, so orders of magnitude less odor that would come out of a stack that had been treated for the odor. And what do you get on your 1 hour max on-site is 0.57 odor units. So the idea here is that half the population would smell that odor if it's at 0.57, because I mentioned earlier, 1 is about, all of us could maybe detect an odor faintly. What they really shoot for in a lot of international rules, and that's absolutely what Massachusetts was modeling this after, was about half of the population would even still smell any odor at all in the ambient air off of their property line. So what did they do in the end? They put in a system, activated carbon system, based on those modeling results to treat the odors. And this activated carbon system was very successful. They've had a huge reduction in complaints. And overall, it's seen as a really good example of how an odor problem can be addressed, even in the US, where we have relatively weak odor standards. Nothing in statute in Massachusetts required this type of system for this type of facility, which was spray coating. But it happened because of the state choosing to enforce its power, and also with this entity wanting to be a good partner and bringing the odor down in that community. One brief slide here, and then we can break for questions. There are a lot of these similar types of processes going on internationally. So that case example I just described in Massachusetts was actually grafted from several examples that are happening, particularly in Europe. France, Germany, Austria, Hungary, the UK, Spain, Netherlands, Belgium, many European countries have policies that have odor control thresholds. They require dispersion modeling. They have best available control technology, reviews and analyses, absolutely have standards written on how to sample for odors and how they should be measured, much like we have EPA methods for stack testing. They have equivalent UK methods for odor sampling and analysis. These are a lot of the things we don't have in the US, but if you are ever interested in looking at, what are some leading examples in other countries, the research here at the bottom of the slide, the reference is a great reference to go to. It's from 2021, relatively recent. There's an international compendium of all the different odor rules out there in the world. So just wanted to share that with you, and I think that's it. Yes, that's the end. That concludes our formal presentation.
Yay, awesome. Okay, so if you have a question, feel free to press the raise button, the little hand. Taya, go ahead.
Hi, Bill. Great presentation. I know that you are currently looking into updating Denver's odor ordinances. Are there any things you talked about the issues that you have currently? Are there any things that you're specifically looking at addressing, like what targeting approaches you're using?
Not that we can go public about yet. We are definitely talking about that internally and talking about it with some of our partners, but we will be likely bringing some odor ordinance, to some revisions to our air pollution control ordinances in the next year or so.
Okay, cool.
Yeah, thanks for your question.
Yeah, thank you. Anyone else? One question for me would be for many of these facilities, is it coming from a stack or is it coming from another place? Like,
Right.
yeah.
Yes. Yeah, great question. In that example I had from Massachusetts, I think that was almost primarily stack, emissions. But yes, I mean, odor is an issue at landfills. It's an issue at composting facilities, where what I would call it is just sort of fugitive odor sources, right? Large surface area. And so some of the abatement technologies there could be treating that that odorous material before it's ever put out into a pile, say on a facility somewhere, or to have a cover over that pile. Those are some basic things I've seen done, but some of the technologies to actually reduce odors in some of those materials from the processing side is pretty interesting. It's there's a lot of bio technologies, and there are certainly folks internationally who specialize in neutralizing odors outside of just using some kind of control technology like a regenerative thermal oxidizer or a thermal oxidizer. You can also abate odors through a lot of just chemical and biological treatment of the odorous material, whatever that may be. So.
Cool. Elizabeth? We can't hear you if you're speaking, but I do see that you are muted. Oh,
Let's see. I still can't hear you. Maybe put your question in the chat.
yeah. While we wait for that, I had another question. Have you done any analysis of complaints versus wind speed and direction? Like, is there a specific wind direction that, like, oh, we're gonna get a bunch of complaints today, that it's just common?
Yeah, and PD, I could use your help on this too. I'll take the first crack at it, but my understanding is we definitely look at wind speed and direction when we receive that complaint. We're not doing like a kind of full season look at like wind speed and direction and where did a group of odors come from, over a period of time. But as we get them one-on-one, we look at wind speed and direction, and that, as far as I understand, PD, that's also part of the assessment you do when you go out on site. Is that right?
Yes, thanks, Bill. Um, Looking at the wind speed, direction, even temperature, we look at that as part of the verification process when we do get these concerns that come in. If we determine that the wind it was at the time of the observation was going the opposite direction, we make the determination that it wasn't necessarily the source that the caller kind of maybe accused, say, a paint shop, say, hey, this paint shop is giving off a lot of paint fumes, paint odors. If we determine that the wind is coming in the wrong direction, we can rule out that paint shop and then maybe look elsewhere for where